Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to the webinar on Marlis Sklodowska-Curie Actions Postdoctoral Fellowship Application Advice, brought to you by Euraxis Australia and New Zealand. It is great to see interest from researchers not only in Australia and New Zealand, but also from 39 other countries across the globe. First of all, please allow me to introduce to you our esteemed guest speakers for today. We have with us Marlis, Erichsen, and Anna Maibohm. They are National Contact Point and Program Committee members for Marlis Sklodowska-Curie Actions at the Danish Ministry of Higher Education and Science. Many thanks to both of you for joining in so early from Copenhagen. And I'm Nishant Sandilya, Regional Coordinator for Euraxis Australia and New Zealand. I'm aware that many of you already had a chance to join our introductory webinar on the postdoctoral fellowship that we delivered on 5th of May. For those who are joining us for the first time, Euraxis is an initiative of the European Commission that addresses barriers to the mobility of researchers and seeks to enhance scientific collaboration between Europe and the rest of the world. We provide free information about European research, career opportunities, international collaboration, and networking possibilities. And as I always say, since all of you are watching this on your laptop or a phone, I'll encourage you to type Euraxis Australia and New Zealand on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube and follow us there. I'd also encourage all of you to please use the Q&A function, not the chat function, in the interface to ask any questions that you might have while our speakers are presenting. Unlike last time when we took all the questions at the end of the presentation, this time around we will be taking your questions periodically. We will provide you the recording and slides of the session. However, the recording will not include the Q&A, and hence I will recommend you to stay for the entire duration if you want our experts to address the common queries that you have. So I think with that, I'll now pass on the presenter privilege to our two esteemed guest speakers, who will be explaining to you how to go about putting together a strong proposal. Over to you, Marlis and Anne.
Thank you very much, Nishant. And hello all, and thank you for joining in for the webinar today. We understand it's a late afternoon or even early evening where you are, at least some of you based in Australia and New Zealand, and welcome wherever you're joining from. Yeah, my name is Anna Maibohm, and with me I have Marlis Erichsen. And good morning. Good afternoon. Yeah, we're standing here from Copenhagen, where it's very early morning. It's 9 o'clock. And as was said, we're based at the Danish Ministry for Higher Education and Science. And here we are working as national contact points, as well as program committee delegates for Horizon Europe in general. And Marlis and I are for the Marlis Sklodowska-Curie actions. I can say for me, I've been working at the agency here for about 10 years, but working with the Marie Curie program for about a year and a half. Maybe Marlis?
Yes, and I started around 8 years ago, and but started with the Marie Curie program. So I've been working with it the whole time. So I have a bit of experience with that. Yeah, so mostly from Horizon 2020 now, and working on the Horizon Europe program. Yeah, and I think we'll start the presentation, right? So
just find our slides here.
Good. Yeah.
So I hope you can all see full screen slides now.
Yes.
So just a brief look at the agenda for our sort of presentation for the webinar today. So first, just a quick overview of our role as these national contact points. What does that mean? What can we help with? And then we'll look sort of briefly at the eligibility criteria, as well as the funding available in these postdoctoral fellowships in the Marie Curie program. I know that you've had a webinar taking place back in May where you've covered these issues already, so we won't dwell too much on it, but we'd like to present it still. Then we'll talk a lot more about how do you then go about applying for a postdoctoral fellowship. So we'll look at the application, we'll look at the two different parts, parts A, part B, and then we'll also look at what are some of the common mistakes, because these were actually presented to us in the program committee by the European Commission not too long ago. So we'll show this to you as well. Then also looking at sort of the format for the application, as well as the evaluation criteria and the evaluation process. And we've tried to allocate some time to have Q&As throughout. So we'll have some breaks where we'll pause and see if you have any questions that we should answer. But we'll also have some time at the end where we'll have sort of a final Q&A. Then Marlis and I have also tried to make it a little bit interactive. So we'll also be asking you a couple of questions as we move along. And we'll do this in Slido, which some of you may know, but we'll introduce it when we come to the questions. So I hope you're willing to participate and be a little bit active as well. Yeah, so first one already here, Slido. And so we hope you'll participate by opening a new browser window and going to slido.com and then entering this code. And then you'll see a question on your screen, which is, what is your main interest today? So it's very useful for us to know, what are you mainly interested in? Is there something we should focus more on than other things? You can also go on via your mobile phone, open a window here and go on to slido.com and enter the code. So we'll just give you maybe a minute or two to get on to slido.com and answer the question here. I see some coming in already. Mistakes to avoid. Yes, that's very good to know, and I think we'll definitely cover that. More information about the global fellowships. Someone's written knowing the application process, and we'll definitely spend some time talking about that. So the selection criteria, we will also be looking at the evaluation. It's good to see that you're willing to participate and write. See someone's looking for tips for a strong application. Yes, I hope you'll be able to take this from our presentation indeed. Words of wisdom from experienced people. Ooh, that's a big one, Marlis. You know, I hope we will be able to bring a little bit of wisdom at least, yeah. And understanding what is expected in the application. So a lot centering about the application or around the applications and also the evaluation and how to write a strong proposal. So we'll definitely talk about that. Right, with that, I think we'll move on, but we'll get back to Slido a little bit later on. So as I said, a little bit about us as national contact points. And as national contact points, we are appointed by the European Commission. And as such, it is our obligation to inform about the opportunities that exist in the EU Framework Program for Research and Innovation, which is Horizon Europe. So we guide on how to choose a relevant topic. We advise on the application writing. We also advise on when projects are being implemented. If issues arise, then we can help sort of how to deal with these issues. And then we also are responsible for distributing useful information and documents that come from the European Commission. So sort of a broad variety of services to inform about Horizon Europe, as well as how to go about sort of practically applying for the topics. There are NCP, these national contact points, in most countries around the world, and we've added a link here where if you're going to be applying for a fellowship, you can search for a national contact point in your host country. So this is useful to know that we are here to help. And then setting sort of the overall frame that we're talking about Horizon Europe, and Marlis Sklodowska-Curie is part of Pillar 1 in Horizon Europe, and it has a budget for this 7-year period from 2021 to 2027 of about 6.6 billion euros. So this is to fund different Marie Curie projects. There are 5 different actions under the Marie Curie program. Today we'll be talking about the postdoctoral fellowships, but it is useful to know that there are also other options available. Then we have another question in Slido just for us to know a little bit about you as well as participants today, because now we've told you a little bit about us. So if you would answer this question about what is your role? So are you an applicant? Are you a supervisor? Are you from a research support unit? Are you from a company or from the industry? Are you a host for a global fellowship? Or are you just curious? I know that just curious can overlap with some of the other answers as well, but try and pick the one that is most suitable for you. Now, see, 87% so far are applicants. And we have, I think, 23 people who've replied here. So it seems there's a large weight on being an applicant here. And then also about 10% that are just curious, and that's also good. It is an interesting program. Also, some of you from sort of research support. Don't see many supervisors attending, and also not many representatives from the companies. So we'll try not to focus too much on that, but focus on what's important for you as an applicant, and also if you're a research supporter.
Yes, and also we asked if anybody's thinking about being a global fellowship host. I can see there are not any replies in that regard, so we can also stay focused on the applicant part. Yeah, that's good.
Good. Let's move on from this one. So the postdoctoral fellowships, so they are an opportunity for experienced researchers who want to carry out their research activities abroad, in this way acquire new skills and develop further their career and their career opportunities. But it is also an opportunity for organizations and research groups who want to attract a qualified researcher to their research group, in this way to be a host for a postdoctoral fellow. The call this year was published back in May, the 12th of May. There is a deadline set at the 14th of September, and it's at 5 o'clock European time. And then there is a budget of 257 million euro for this year's call. So there's a call deadline each year, and it is normally at the end of the year in November. And this just sort of briefly about the overall setting for the postdoctoral fellowships. The aim is, as I said, strengthen researchers who are already in the possession of a doctoral degree. The fellow will work on an individual research project and will have a supervisor assigned to guide and help with the training. There is focus on what is called I3 mobility as part of the project, this meaning that it should be international, intersectoral, and interdisciplinary, as these are important elements of Marie Curie mobility. And there is also focus on the involvement of non-academic sector participants. So this is also seen as important for the postdoctoral fellowships. This, of course, to make sure that the researcher will have as many career opportunities as possible when finishing the project. So if non-academic sector are involved, this is seen as a way to create better access to also working in non-academic sectors. And the non-academic sector is anything that's not academic. So this could be a company, but it could also be a museum or anything other where the primary function is not education or science and research. Then why are the postdoctoral fellowships interesting for you as an applicant? It offers a new learning opportunity, working abroad, working in a strong organization who are sort of leading for the research area. It's also a chance for you to improve your resume, your CV, The Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowships are very renowned, and it's a strong thing to have on your CV resume. Then also it's an opportunity to enhance your profile internationally and establish a strong international network. And then we also just had a few points about how it is also interesting for the supervisor, being that you can attract a high quality postdoctoral researcher to your group. And you can also sort of enlarge your international network and show your leadership skills as well as your mentoring skills. And then, so the next 4 slides or so, I'll try and move through them fairly fast because they're covering sort of the eligibility criteria and who can apply. And as I said, you already had this in another webinar, but we'll just sort of sum it up. So there are 2 types of fellowships. We have the European fellowships, which cover mobility from any country in the world to a European member state or associated country, or mobility from one member state or associated country to another. These are open to researchers of any nationality. And we have the global fellowships, which cover mobility from Europe to outside Europe, so to a third country. And this is then followed by a mandatory return phase to an organization in a European member state or associated country. And these fellowships are, you can apply if you are a European national or you are what is known as a long-term resident in Europe. And this says that you have to have resided in a European member state or associate country for a period of 5 consecutive years. Then it's a bottom-up program, means that all research domains can be funded, and this is including some research areas under the Euratom Treaty. The duration for the European fellowships, it's 12 to 24 person months, so 1 to 2 years. The global fellowships a little bit longer, is 24 person months to 36 person months, where you have 12 to 24 in the third country, and then you have this mandatory return phase of 12 months in a member state or associated country. As a new thing, it's possible to add 6 months to this duration, and this is what is called placement, where you can be in an organization in the non-academic sector. And this has to take place in an organization that's based in a member state or an associated country. And then for both fellowships, it's possible to have secondments, and you can do secondments for up to 1/3 of the fellowship duration. These secondments can take place in any country in the world. So this is also of great interest to many researchers, and we see that a lot of researchers do the secondments as part of their fellowship. And for eligibility, it's for experienced researchers. As I said, you have to be in possession of a doctoral degree. This is defined as you have to have successfully defended your doctoral thesis. You do not have to have the diploma in hand, but you have to have had the date pass where you defended your thesis successfully. There is, however, a cap on how much experience you can have. This is set at a maximum of 8 years full-time equivalent research experience after the doctoral degree. So after the date on your diploma, then if you are within 8 years of full-time experience, then you are eligible to apply. And there's been introduced some incentives for career restart and reintegration. For career restart, it means that the time that you've been away from research, if for instance you've been on maternity leave, paternity leave, then this time will not count towards your full-time experience. And then also incentive for reintegration means that if you've been working with research in a third country and you're wanting to come back to Europe, if you're a European national, this time will also not be factored in. Then there is the single mobility rule, and this is an important rule that that you really need to focus on. It means you must not have resided or carry out the main activity in the country of the beneficiary for more than 12 months in the 36 months immediately before the call deadline. It means if you're already in a European organization and you want to do a European fellowship, you must not already have been here for more than 12 months in the 36 months immediately before the call deadline. So important to consider. And then also just briefly touching upon the funding available. We have contributions are directly for the recruited researchers. Here we have the living allowance of 5,080 euro per person month. So this goes directly to the researcher. The mobility allowance also goes directly to the researcher. This is 600 euro per person month, and this is to cover the private travel of the researcher while being in the project. Then if you're married or if you have dependent children or you're in a marriage-like relationship, then you are also eligible for family allowance, which is 660 euro per person month. This family allowance, if you get married, for instance, in the middle of the project, then you will become eligible for this family allowance at that point. And we also have long-term leave allowance and the special needs allowance, and these cover the ability for the beneficiary to have their expenses covered if there is long-term leave, meaning that the researcher is away from the project for more than 30 days. If the beneficiary has expenses related to this that are not covered, for instance, by a government fund, then this can be covered by the European Commission. Also, the special needs allowance is an opportunity to receive funds to cover special needs requirements. So this could mean that if you have a visual impairment and you need a certain screen, the expenses for this can also be covered by the project. Then we have the institutional unit contributions, which go to the host institution to cover the project. And these research, training, and network contribution, they indirectly, of course, go to the researcher, because this is to cover the training, the research expenses related to the research project. And this is 1,000 euro per person month. And then last one on the right side is management and indirect contribution. And this is 650 euro per person month to sort of manage the implementation of the project. And this goes to the host institution. And then important here also to point out that a country correction coefficient applies. There is one for each country in the world. I've added them here for Australia. The coefficient is 100.9%, and for New Zealand it's 98.9%. This is just to show one of them, and this is sort of to correct for the living expenses that can be more or less, it can be lower or higher in certain countries. For instance, here in Denmark, the coefficient is 132 because living expenses are fairly high here in Denmark. So this is factored in, and this applies then for the living allowance. And then I think this was it to sort of sum up the eligibility criteria and who is able to apply. So I hope if any of you were sort of unsure if this was an opportunity for you, that you are more sure now. Just we'll move on to talk about the application and sort of the format and what is required. So the application form is made of two parts, part A and part B. Part A is data that needs to be electronically added in the portal. As was explained, you will access this from the funding and tenders portal, which is the European Commission's sort of access to funding opportunities. And here you will add, submit, or apply, and then you will be asked to insert some data in the portal. Then we have part B, which consists of part B1 and part B2. B1 is covers excellent impact and implementation, which are sort of the main elements of your application, what needs to be covered. This is a maximum of 10 pages, and it's important that you follow the format instructions. So there is an application form which outlines what you need to write where, and it's important that you follow the instructions in the form. Then we have B2, where you will add your CV and also information about the host organizations or any partners where you will be going for secondments or placement. Here, we'll also add letters of commitment. If, for instance, you're going for a placement this 6-month period after, or at the very end of your project, there needs to be a letter of commitment from the organization that you're going through. So this is one example of a need for a letter of commitment. There's no page limit for this B2, so whatever is necessary needs to be added here. And then just a brief look here at the evaluation panels, and I'll get back to them at sort of the end of the presentation as well. But it's important from the very beginning that you choose the scientific panel, the scientific area that applies to your application, because this will determine who will evaluate your proposal. They need to be experts within the area that you're doing your research. So this is important that you choose the right one from the beginning. And there are 8 scientific panels that your proposal will be evaluated. One of them, we have chemistry, economic sciences, we have ICT and engineering, and we have earth and environmental sciences, life sciences, mathematics, physics, and last, social sciences and humanities. So whichever one your application fits into. Each one of these panels will then have 2 ranking lists, one for the European fellowships and one for the global fellowships. And then, as I said in the very beginning, the Commission recently presented to us their sort of experiences from last year's call, the 2021 call, and where they saw that the most common mistakes were made when filling out this part 1. And again, part 1 is electronic data that needs to be added to sort of an electronic template. And these are, for us, were very useful to know, and hence we believe that they will also be important for you to know for when you are to set out filling this part A. So we'll run through these, and these are slides that were presented to us from the European Commission that we've sort of included in the presentation here. So the very first mistake that was seen was that applicants would choose the wrong type of action. So you have to be you have to make sure that you choose the right action when you apply, because you have to choose the right entrance. Are you going for a global fellowship or are you going for a European fellowship? So make sure that you choose the right one when you are to do your application. Then there are also instances where the wrong applicant organization was typed in. So instead of doing information about the host organization, the European Commission saw that the host for the outgoing phase in a global fellowship was added, and this is not the primary host. It could also be that wherever the research is employed at the time that this was added, but this is also not the real future host. So just make sure that it's the real future host, that it's their information that you're adding. And just to show that when you go onto the funding and tender portal and you select the topic, you'll either a global fellowship or a European fellowship, you will come to this page. In here, you have to make sure, then you see sort of the green headline where it says deadline, and there's a purple box here. You have to make sure that you've chosen the right action. So at the end, it will say GF or EF. Just make sure that you've chosen either the global or the European fellowship, whichever applies to you. And then here, every organization that is applying needs to have a PIC number. And this PIC number that you'll have to add here, it has to be from the organization that will be your future host. So just make sure again that it's the right PIC number. And then some mistakes were also seen regarding information about people and the basic proposal details. The Commission wants to make it very clear that the researcher and the supervisor are not and cannot be the same person. And I will show in the next slide where you need to fill this in. And then there were also cases where there's missing the abstract, the right scientific panel was not chosen, or there wasn't chosen a panel, and keywords weren't typed in. And the way to go about this, you will come to this chart, and here up here you have to select your role, sort of in the middle, and here you can press the supervisor button. Then you have to add information about the supervisor, and then you do the researcher. You add information about the researcher. Then you can also add a contact person, which is normally an administrative person in the host organization who will also somehow be involved in the project and take care of some of the maybe administrative details. And then here, sort of the intro information about your application, you will have to add an acronym, and then you add a short summary. And then down here at the very last red marking is where you choose the scientific panel. And there it's a drop-down menu. And once you've chosen the panel here, you will come to sort of a number of descriptors. These are keywords related to the scientific area. So these are also important to choose, and choose more than one keyword to make sure that you're matched with the correct experts to evaluate your proposal. There are also some free keywords. If you don't see one that matches 100% what you're working with, your research, then you can add some free keywords as well at the bottom. And then I think it's you, Marlis, to talk a little bit about the list of participants and mistakes here.
Yes, thank you, Anne. I've just been looking at the Q&A also, so trying to reply to some of your questions as we go along. Right, so Anne has mentioned this about the different Part A and the challenges that have been there. So something that has been here is that the wrongly encoded non-academic placements were a bit of a problem in the former proposal writing. So 50% of the non-academic placements were really secondments and not non-academic placements. So this is why the Commission has made these slides for us, so that we can inform you how to sort of correctly encode all these things. So also it was wrongly encoded what was the outgoing and the return phase institution. Okay, I just need to click on this one. There we go. So you have to, when the proposal is created, you have to list all the participants in the proposal. So you start by having the host organization. That's always the main and first organization that you mention, and you mention what type of contact there is. So if you're the one registering and you're the researcher on the project, then you write that you're the researcher. Perhaps if it's a supervisor registering, then they write their name when they're logged in. And perhaps you also have a research support person at the university that has that you're in touch with, and they also have a contact. So you can add these 3 contacts in the proposal. So there's a maximum of those 3, but that should be what is relevant. So when you encode the secondments, you only encode the outgoing phase for global fellowships or the non-academic placement for the European fellowships or global fellowships, if that's what you need. So that's the only thing that is counted as secondment. It's a technical thing in the system. And so it's just to sort of remind you that those are what are needed in this Part A section. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. So what you end up with is for global fellowships. You have 3 possible participants. You have on the top, you have the beneficiary, the host organization in the European or associated country. You have the associated partner, which is the host of the outgoing phase. And then you possibly have an associated partner for the non-academic placement. So that's the maximum that is possible actually for the global fellowships, the 3. If you have a European fellowship, then you only have either the future beneficiary, or you have a future beneficiary, and then you have possibly a placement if you have chosen to have a placement. So that's why we're sort of trying to stress that don't include the shorter secondments of about sort of up to 1/3 of the time here. They don't need to be registered in the system here. So in the part B section, so the Word document, you also have to add text about these associated partners. You have here in the left side, you have for the outgoing phase, the mandatory for global fellowships, you have the outgoing partner, and then you have the academic, non-academic placement possibility also. And you register them and you describe their capacity for the participating organizations. You add information about them and their sort of the structure of them and their capacity to receive you as a researcher. So then we move on to the secondments. So these are these sort of optional secondments going somewhere for a period of time, up to 1/3 of the fellowship. It can be sort of 3 months somewhere, it can be a longer period, it can be shorter periods, but it's sort of going, and it can be in any country of your choice. It can globally. I saw there was a question in the Q&A about where can the secondments be? They can be anywhere in the world. Where can the placements also, well, during the global fellowships, it's during the 3rd country period. During the European fellowship, it can be for the whole time. The placements are only, as Anne mentioned earlier, they are only during at the end of the project. So, and they're only to be in European or associated countries. Yeah. So when you have these secondments, you need to include that in part A, section 5, and I'll show you a picture of that in just a moment, under other questions. And you also describe it in the narrative part in part B, and in the dedicated tables also that I just showed you. So this is where you, under the other section, sort of other questions, say yes, you have envisaged secondments. So you may be going to a company somewhere to sort of do some lab work or to have some experience there. If you're going on several secondments, what the Commission has told us is that you just add up the number of months. So you can't register sort of several secondments here, you just add up. If you have 2 times 3 months, you add 6 months here. So it doesn't matter if it's sort of several periods, you just add them up. And then it has to, of course, be mirrored in the part B section where you describe it more thoroughly. So this is also where you would describe it in the text, but also add them in this table, associated partner for a secondment, which is optional. Yes, and you also describe their capacity to receive you as a researcher. Then there's a little bit about the validation. Again, it's very sort of part of the system that you have to add all the right information, and there can be some warnings in the system. Some of them sort of show that there is some inconsistency in what you have registered, and it will indicate a warning. Some of it can be something that is blocking, that if you haven't sort of resolved it, the proposal will be blocked from actually sort of sending it finally. So you have to sort of check, you have to sort of press validate to get these either warnings or blocking issues, and you have to resolve all of them, or you should resolve all of them before you actually send in the proposal. I have a picture of that here. So you press validate first to get all the correct, sort of to get a visual of the warnings possibly. We have had experience that some of the warnings were not sort of that relevant. You could sort of look past them, but you have to, I would recommend to just check with your research support or with your NCP if that is okay then. And then you press submit at the end. Okay. Then we also have some errors that were made in the budget. So maybe there was somebody who encoded the wrong nations. Some had written third country instead of the member state for the host beneficiary. And this, of course, gives an incorrect budget, as I explained, that in the global fellowships, if you're going to Australia, you have one country correction coefficient. If you're going to Denmark, you have another. So you need to really watch out that you are encoding the correct country code for that period of time. And I have a picture of that in just a moment. So the wrong encoding gives a wrong budget, and you have to really check that. I won't go through all the details in this. Some had also added the secondments in the budget, and that gave an extra budget. So that actually gave a too high budget for the proposal, and that had to be corrected then. So this is how it sort of should look, that you have in the first line, you have the duration of the outgoing phase. This should be a third country that is registered. Then you should have a member state for the return phase. And then it will be the same member state that you register for the placement. So that sort of the associated partner will follow it there. And that should give the correct number of months and the correct budget. So it's really all automatically generated. You'll see that when you go into part A. Yes, so when there are no more validation or error warnings, you can save and prepare that and submit. And a nice information is also that you can submit as many times as you want. You can add a new part B PDF as many times as you want. We actually recommend to do it, a couple of days before the deadline, and then you can keep working on your Word document, PDF it, and then upload it again. It's always the latest version that is accepted by the Commission. So you just submit a new version. The new version is always. So some people sit there at 4:45 on the 14th of September, and if something suddenly pops up, some kind of technical problem, and then they can be ensured if they've sort of uploaded a version the day before, that's the one that will be used. So that's really a recommendation from us to do that. So when you're in the system, you've sort of pressed that you want to apply, then you download the Part B templates, the B1, B2 Word documents, and then which looks like this on the right side. And then you start typing, you can say. So, and the questions in the first part B1 is always on the 3 sections, which are typical for Horizon projects. It's excellence, impact, and implementation. So we'll just go through those 3 sections and the questions that are asked there. So you have question 1.1, and there is actually when you see the template, there are sort of there is assisting text which helps you reply to this. But the first question is the quality and pertinence of the project's research and innovation objectives and the extent to which they are ambitious and go beyond state of the art. So this is where you present your idea, you present the research project as such, and what you want to work on. And here our advice is to really, do the elevator speech also, make the evaluator interested in what you're going to do. And we also think that it's nice to make it a bit personal, to sort of say that this is something, this is also something which is going to develop my career. But there are some questions about this in the proposal also. So, but really this is about the research project and what your objectives are. Then you have this question 1.2, soundness of the proposed methodology, including interdisciplinary approaches, which was what Anne mentioned, that this is an important aspect. Consideration of the gender dimension in the research and other diversity aspects, if relevant for the research project, and the quality of open science practices. So you actually have to reply to quite a lot here. It's the methodology of your project. And this is actually, we did an analysis during Horizon 2020 on this section. And this really also has to be, this was something where we often found a weakness, that the proposed methodology really had to be the right and timely one, and sort of the most state-of-the-art methodology. It's quite important to your research project also, and was quite evaluated quite strongly in the proposal. So you write if you have interdisciplinary approaches and the gender dimension in the research if relevant, and describe the open science practices, which is something which is politically very important to the European Commission, that there is open science and access to what you actually are working with. Section 1.3 is quality of the supervision. training of the two-way transfer of knowledge between the researcher and the host. Here in Horizon Europe, there is increased focus on the supervisor. There is actually a guidance on supervision that we have linked to in our presentation. And here it says two-way transfer of knowledge. So it's between the knowledge that you receive from the supervision and from the host organization, but it's also, now you're an experienced researcher, so it's also what you bring to the organization that you're going to. And in the case of a global fellowship, it's a three-way transfer of knowledge. So you actually have to describe a little more here in this section. So it's really important that you describe both ways, that it's not only you receiving a lot of knowledge, but you're also giving a lot to the host. Section 1.4 is quality and appropriateness of the researcher's professional experiences, competences, and skills. So you describe where you are in your professional life, where are you situated, and also a little bit about your ambitions and what you would like to achieve. So is it, do you want to achieve to, have a research group? Do you want to, maybe take your research into a company, into innovations? What is your ambition about this? So it's about where you are situated in your professional experience, and you're always evaluated according to the level of experience that you have. So these proposals are, there may be somebody who has just received a PhD and somebody who has these 8 years of experience. You're evaluated at the level where you are. So that's also, I think, something which is important to know. So then we have the section about impact. This is where you show how this proposal has impact on your career perspectives and employability in the future. And this can be employability both within research, but also within the non-academic section, and how this will contribute to your skills development. And this can both be the research skills, but also transferable skills. Then you have the suitability and quality of the measures to maximize expected outcomes and impacts set out in the dissemination, exploitation plan, and communication activities. And we really advise you to have a really, I always turn it a bit around and say you make a communication plan here. What you write, how do you want to communicate your project? Communication is something you do right away. You can say, I've got this project, and you maybe have a website, or you'll have some social media, or you somehow communicate all the activities that you do in your project. Dissemination is conferences, it's publications, and so on. How will you disseminate your research work to your peers? And exploitation is how you will really exploit the knowledge that you gained from the project. So it's more at the end of the project that you do this exploitation of the results that you have. But make a really clear plan, perhaps make a table about how you will maximize these expected outcomes and impacts through these activities. Then you have the magnitude and importance of the project's contribution to the expected scientific, societal, and economic impacts. Of course, this depends on the subject of your proposal. What will the reach of your project be? How far will it go? How many, or how much will it impact on you can say on Europe, on the world, globally? What type of impact will this have? And I'd advise you to look at the text for this below in the proposal, how to sort of fill out this section in the proposal. It's important that you have a strong impact in the proposal. Okay. Then you have the quality and we've gone to section 3 now, quality and efficiency of the implementation. So here we're at the work plan, where you assess also risks and appropriateness of the effort assigned to the work packages. Here is where you describe your work packages in tables. How are you going to actually work on the project that you described in section 1 and 2. What's the timing, and where are you going to be, and so on for this. And you always start with month 1, because you don't know if you'll start in September, October, or November, but you always start with month 1 and then till month, for example, 24, and describe the process of your project. And you also have a Gantt chart here, which is included within these 10 pages. Then you also describe the quality and capacity of the host institutions and participating organizations, including hosting arrangements. Here you show that they have the infrastructure both to receive you personally, sort of a HR department, to receive you as perhaps from somewhere else in the world, to include you in the research group. How does the host go about doing this? And this is where you get help, typically from research support at the host organization, where they put in sort of how they assist you in being received well at the organization, but also how you will be included in the research work, and what type of hosting arrangements they have for you, also what type of infrastructure they have. Good, and I think I'll pass the word on to Anne, who will just explain the important documents that are important for you. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we've added this slide just to show some important documents that are important and useful for you to sort of look through. First, we have the Marie Curie work program. And we've added links directly. So the work program is very important, outlines the different funding opportunities in Marie Curie. Then we also have the the postdoctoral fellowships guide for applicants, which is a useful sort of short format guideline for how to go about applications and what are the rules for applying. Then we have the standard application form. We have guidelines on supervision. As Marlis said, the supervisor role is very important in the fellowships, and the Commission has developed these guidelines that sort of set out what is good supervision in projects. And we also have the Marie Curie Green Charter, which outlines what is recommendations for the green implementation of projects. So this deals with the actual implementation of your projects, which could be examples like, could you have participation in an online conference instead of traveling for a conference? This could be a way of greening the implementation of the project. Then we also have the evaluation form here. I'll talk a little bit about evaluation just after this. And here the evaluation form is very important. So the evaluation form is the one that the experts, the evaluators, use when they evaluate your application. And there are specific questions here that the evaluators are looking for answers to. So when you're writing your application, this is useful to have a look through this and see, have you answered these questions that they will be posing. So as for the proposal and the evaluation of this, there is a 10-page limit. This is a very firm page limit. If you write more pages than the 10, the evaluators will never see them. So there's no point in doing this. So a strict 10-page limit. As I said earlier, there are no limits to the annexes that you add. And then also, I said in the beginning that the applications will be evaluated in one of 8 scientific panels, and these are also listed here. And in the beginning, when you sent in your application, you will have made sure that you have chosen the most appropriate scientific area for your application, and this then determines in which panel your application is evaluated. And then there are 2 ranking lists, one for the European fellowships and one for the global fellowships. The evaluation process is, first, there is a remote evaluation, and this is done individually by at least 3 experts, or 3 evaluators look at each application. This is then followed by a consensus meeting of these at least 3 evaluators, And here they will decide a final score for your application. Then applications are listed, and these two ranking lists, as I said on the previous slide. And here they are listed either as on the main list, which is directly going to funding. And then we have the reserve list, which are really strong proposals. And if a further funding becomes available, then they will be funded. Then we have a below available budget sort of section, and then also a below threshold. And the threshold is set at 70%. So this means that your application needs to receive a score of at least 70% in order to be considered for funding in general. If you are below this threshold, you will not be considered for funding. This is the threshold in principle. What we see, though, is that the actual cutoff score is significantly higher. And I'll get back to that because I have a slide on that as well, so that you can see what score your application actually in reality needs to achieve in order to be considered for funding. But first, just sort of a brief look also at the evaluation criteria. Marlis went through these main parts of your application: the excellence, impact, and the implementation. Here, quality and efficiency of the implementation. And these are the main sections that the evaluators will be looking at. For excellence, they'll be looking at the quality of the research innovation objectives that are written in the application. They'll also look at the methodology. And also here, supervision will be considered, and the quality of the supervision presented in the application. Then for impact, the evaluators will look to see if it's been credibly described the career perspective and employability of the researcher and how these will be strengthened by the project. Then also the suitability of the measures that are presented in terms of dissemination, exploitation, as well as communication activities related to the project activities. And then the last one, quality and efficiency of implementation. Here it's looked at how is it presented that the project will be implemented. Is this a high quality? Are the host institutions, are their quality and their capacity presented well? And also the work plan, as Marlis also talked about, is this an appropriate work plan? Are the risks considered? Are they considered well? And then there is this weighing. They have a different weighing, each of these criteria, and this will come to the final score of the application. Here the evaluation form, which I already mentioned that this is an important document to have at hand when writing your application to make sure you've answered all the questions that the evaluators are looking for answers to. And then coming back to this, the cutoff scores. So the threshold is set at a 70%, but we see that the applications for the fellowships are very strong, and there is strong competition. So these are the cutoff scores, meaning that if you're below this score in your panel, then you were not considered for funding on the main list. So we see that all of these are up in the 90s. And even for some engineering and environment, here you see for global fellowships, they're up in 95.8. So these are high scores, and you will need a sort of a similar high score to be considered for funding. Then we just wanted to add here that from this year and moving forward, the Commission has introduced a restriction of resubmission, which means that if you applied last year and your proposal got a score of less than 70%, then you should not be applying for the following year. If you have a score of less than 70% and you reapply, your proposal or your application will not be evaluated. You can send in a new application the following year if you've made sort of substantial changes to the application that you sent in the previous year. And then I think our very last slides here are statistics from the 2021 call, which I saw there was some questions too as well in the chat, in the Q&A. So there was sent in 8,247 applications for the 2021 call, and out of these, 1,156 projects were funded. This time comes to a success rate for about 14.02%. A fairly good success rate for these European projects. And then just a couple of useful links that we've added here at the end, and I won't go through them, but they're available in the presentation. It's further reading for you who are who may be applying for a fellowship.
I'm sure the audience will join me in thanking both of you, Marlis and Anne. I think it was an excellent session, lots of interactive points and lots of clarity in terms of pertinent questions. I'm sure our audience got a lot of useful insights from both of you, and we're very optimistic that there will be an increased number of applications, successful ones actually, from the region in 2022. With that, I think we are already ahead of our allotted time, and I'd like to wrap up now. And please allow me to reiterate to keep an eye on our social media platforms to get notified of news events from the European research landscape. I think with that, we come to an end of today's session, and signing off for today and wishing you all a good week ahead. And also, again, a big thank you to both of you, Marlis and Anne. It was really a pleasure. And thank you everyone for joining.
And good luck.
Thank you, good luck, and thanks for all your good questions. Bye-bye.